Hello and welcome. My name is Shawn and I'm the Associate Professor of Political Science here at Campbellsville University. And I want to thank you for joining us on one of our podcasts where we're going to be interviewing candidates for local, regional, and county-wide office here in the Central Kentucky region. I have with me today one of our candidates, and if you'd please introduce yourself and tell the people at home a little bit about why you're running for office.
All right, my name's Nicole Britton, and I'm from right here in Taylor County, Kentucky. I come from a hardworking middle-class family. I'm a mother of 2 children, both who attend public school, and I'm a teacher. Been teaching kids with moderate to severe disabilities and autism for over 13 years, and in my spare time, I like to advocate for old people, animals, and children.
Now, you're running for the state Senate seat. What are some of the previous experiences that you've had that you feel have prepared you for the office?
Well, I have always been a natural leader, and I was raised by strong women who thought that women should take a seat at the table. We shouldn't wait for one to be offered to us. We should take it. And so growing up, I was accustomed to women participating in leadership. My mother was a top sales associate in a direct sales company, so that was something I was very familiar with. And during my teaching career, I've been elected to site-based decision-making council several times. I've been a mentor to several new teachers and worked with universities in developing their program. So public service and leadership have always just been a part of my life and something that I felt like it was not only a privilege but also a duty.
What are some of the priorities, some of the issues that have led you to run for office? What do you want to change once you get to Frankfort?
Well, of course, one of the first things that I want to work on is the issues that come to face our public schools and our public service professions. We were treated very poorly during this last session, and I think it left a lot of bad feelings towards the legislature in general. And I feel like it's time for us to take that back and to support the hardworking people in Kentucky, to start to look at doing away with things like right to work, which would have been more accurately called right to work for less, and discuss a prevailing wage for our craftsmen and artisans who bring trades to the table. And then probably the next biggest priority for me would be issues for our environment, and not just necessarily are we all recycling enough, but what's our water supply look like in our state? We have counties right now that are struggling with polluted waterways, and that's a state issue. It's not just that county's issue. It's something that we all need to be concerned about, because there's only a certain amount of water on this planet. Something else that concerns me is the power grid. We have upgraded it some in parts of the state, but it's something that we need to continue to look at as we grow our industry and as our population continues to grow. We need to look at what we're doing for our infrastructure.
One of the top priorities of in the current climate of Matt Bevin and of the legislature has been improving competitiveness, trying to make sure that Kentucky is competitive with other states in our area and with other countries around the globe. What are some of the things that you think we can be doing better, or that the legislature needs to do to improve our competitiveness?
I think one thing that we need to do is we need to look at the solar initiatives. Kentucky is poised to have a booming solar industry, and that impact of that could be passed on to the consumer. And I know that the electric companies don't necessarily like the idea of a solar panel taking away from their profits. But it is the right thing to do in that it's cleaner for the environment, it's better for consumers, and it strengthens the power grid in the amount of electricity that could be allocated towards industry. And so that's one thing that industry might not have to consider if we could look at different ways to generate electricity in our state. We could look at better ways to power those industries. And the other thing I would like to see us do is provide all schools with more funding for high-tech education. Our #1 export in the state right now are things to do with aerospace and defense. And we have a few schools who are really excelling in putting those programs into place, but it's something that all students could benefit from. And we could look at placing those jobs all over our state instead of just those few isolated counties that are capitalizing on that right now. Additionally, there's only one master's program, and it's just now being built being put into place at Moorhead for the aerospace industry. So I'd like to look at how do we get those type of high-tech master's degree programs in our state so that we retain that part of our workforce.
You'd mentioned workforce training a little bit in your last response. Here in Taylor County, in the city of Campbellsville, we're actually kind of blessed. Taylor County ISD is one of the top ranked in the state. Campbellsville ISD, especially the elementary and middle school programs, are highly regarded. Campbellsville University has a growing regional as well as international reputation. However, on the flip side, we're producing all these great graduates, and then they end up moving away and traveling to Louisville or Lexington or out of state. Do you think that the legislature needs to be purposeful in trying to promote economic development in rural areas like ours? If so, any strategies that you could suggest?
Absolutely. I think that, most of our state would be considered a rural area. And we've done a very good job of seeing to it that our students with bachelor's degrees and even master's degrees have the opportunity to stay here in the state and to put those degrees to use. So we absolutely need to look at the profiles of each community and talk about the waterways that we have access to, the rail systems that we have access to, all of those things that communities may not see as a strength, or companies may not see as a strength. But if we marketed that and we explain these are all of the things that Kentucky has to offer, we might see more of a response and be able to get our highly trained people to stay in our rural areas.
You really couldn't talk about the issues facing Kentucky without talking about the opioid crisis. Certainly this is a national epidemic, but It's one that's been hitting Kentucky probably worse than many places. Do you feel the legislature or the state of Kentucky should be doing more to address the opioid crisis? Or do you feel that this is mostly a local or county level issue?
Well, I was reviewing the statistics on that before our interview, and I found that Kentucky is third in all 50 states in opioid overdoses. And so it's absolutely all of our responsibility to figure out different ways we can address that. And there's a lot of components to it. We know poverty plays a role. We know that lack of health care plays a role. We know that lack of access to emergency services in rural areas plays a role. But one of the main things that we're doing in the state right now is we lock up people we're angry with. We put people who are in possession of opioids or who are overdosed on opioids, we end up putting those people in jail. And we don't lock up the people we're necessarily afraid of. So jail is certainly not a rehabilitative place for someone with an addiction. So I think we need to look at more of a comprehensive approach to treat the individual, the family, the community, and all of those things to bring that full circle. And I'll go even a step further and say that I'm a strong supporter of medical marijuana. And there have been repeated studies that show that different properties in medicinal marijuana could support opioid addicts in their recovery. And I just really don't understand why, as a state, we are lagging behind in offering that option or exploring that option to offer people when we're clearly losing loved ones every day.
In the last legislative session, another issue that came up was the question of pension reform.
Yeah.
It was a statewide issue, but it certainly was one that we really applied more to the question of teacher pensions than most others. Are you comfortable with where we are right now in terms of pension reform? Do you think the need for reform is overstated? How do you think we should be trying to address the pension crisis?
Well, I certainly think the need for reform was overstated. When the actuaries came back, what they found, when the nonpartisan actuary came back, what they found is our pension fund was actually growing. And so given enough time, it would have stabilized on its own. And what we've created now is sort of a drain, so that if people have already retired, I have worked and hopefully I have paid in enough to support their retirement. But the people who come in behind me, because I'm middle of the road, they're in this shared contribution plan. So mathematically, it seems like that the bottom of my retirement would be falling out. So I'm not at all comfortable with where we are. And given the difficulty we have recruiting people to teach in all areas, but especially in my area for students with moderate to severe disabilities, I don't understand why removing one of the largest reasons that a lot of people go into teaching One of the perks of being a teacher was having a pension, because our pay is substantially less than equally qualified professionals. So I'm not comfortable with it at all, and that's something I'd really like to see fixed.
Here on Campbellsville University campus, of course, we're a nonprofit private institution, so we're a little bit insulated from state level funding issues. But as we look at the public universities, as we look at middle schools, high schools across the state, this question of education funding keeps coming up. Do you feel that schools in Kentucky, K through 12 university, do you feel they're adequately funded?
Absolutely not. You know, again, with this recent budget, the funds for textbooks were cut. The funds for professional development were cut. And now they have even cut the requirement for teachers to have a master's degree. And I understand that that's a financial commitment. It's a financial commitment that I made to get my master's degree. And I get that. But also, our students are worth investing in. I don't want my child to have to go without a new textbook. I don't want my child to have a teacher who only has a bachelor's degree and is not supported by the state in getting her master's. I feel like that's something we owe them. And additionally, they cut the arts this time, and I think that's really, really sad. The Arts Council provided, I looked it up before I came, 794 full-time jobs, 770 part-time jobs, and put approximately $7 million into state and federal taxes. And they saw a huge cut in this recent budget that was passed, and I just think that's terrible.
If you start adding up some of the initiatives you've been discussing so far, talking about the solar power initiatives, funding pensions, increasing funding for education, paying for increased rebuild, all of these things cost money. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the legislature needs to be looking at additional funding sources? May we need to look at raising taxes, or do you feel like there's enough money already if we just allocate it better to pay for these things?
Well, the first thing I think we can do, instead of increasing the taxes on 95% of Kentuckians, which is what happened in this last budget, we're now going to be paying increased taxes on our pet grooming, veterinary and car repairs, all kinds of local services. So that increased the taxes on the backs of the working people. And then we have a regressive tax on tobacco users. And hopefully we see that amount of income go down. I certainly wouldn't want people to continue using tobacco products in the name of funding anything. But we gave a $60 million tax break to banks and insurance companies. And it was done carefully. It was done in the name of, well, they'll create jobs if we provide them with this tax break. But there are no safeguards for that. There are no guarantees that they will do what they said they will do. And so we need to close that kind of loophole. We shouldn't be handing out that much in corporate welfare.
Now, when voters go to vote for you on November 6th, they're not actually going to see your name on the ballot.
Right.
How does voting for you work differently than for some of the other candidates?
All right. So I'm a write-in candidate, and you will see Senate District 16 on the ballot. Beneath that, it will have my opponent's name, and then under there will be an empty box, and it will have a blank beside it. You need to color in that box completely. Don't check it. Color the box completely and write my name, Nicole Britton, NicoleBritton.
So we are approaching the deadline for the election. The election's held on November 6th. Most of the people who are going to be watching this podcast will probably be watching it in the couple of days or maybe the week or two before the election. As you compare yourself to other candidates, and not just your opponent for this race, but
right.
the candidates for other races they'll be considering, is there one characteristic or one quality that you feel voters need to consider before they go in and cast their vote?
Absolutely. I would say vote for the candidate who has shown that they have your best interest at heart. Vote for the candidate that shows that they care the most about your public school, that they care the most about your children, that they care the most about our environment, and I certainly feel like that's me.
Ms. Britton, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time as well, if you've watched this podcast. If you found us online or through a link, hope that you know that there are also several other podcasts where we've interviewed candidates for other races, including for this current one. So go and check those out. And if you would, please make sure you go vote on November 6th. God bless.